Hey, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the 54th, right? 54th Comic Art Live Chat. It's a beautiful evening here in Northeast Ohio. Very warm, uncomfortably warm, in fact. But maybe it's because I've been on the hot seat this afternoon. I've had a few things going on that some people were upset about, and so I wanted to clear the air before we start the chat with Harry tonight. It's not too upset, but lots of inquiries and questions about that. The fact that we turned on the ability for you to see who is watching your CAF gallery. And that we talked about that. We said we were going to do it, and so we finally did it. And there were some issues with it. Maureen actually turned it on earlier than she should have, so there were some bugs with it to begin with. I think when it was first turned on, everybody was worried about this number 52, right? Because that was actually my count. Somehow she had managed to make it so that everybody's count showed mine. So everybody who went from 100 to 52 panicked, and then when it finally got fixed, there was an issue with the links going to the right people's galleries. It was they were all going to your gallery when you clicked on them, so that was an error. And then what we found out rather quickly was that the count that you had always seen in the past was actually including people who were no longer premium and were in fact no longer watching your CAF gallery because they're not premium. They don't have the extra column in the right-hand column letting them see a watch list or the ability to get to that page, all those things. So we were like, wow, look at that. It's been wrong forever. So if somebody then went from 80 to 70 or 65 or heck, even down to 40, God only knows. I mean, remember, watching galleries has been an active premium member feature since 2005. So the number of turnover, the amount of turnover in premium members who have watched galleries in the past is pretty significant. And so it's unfortunate that we never knew that the count was wrong. So, yes. So wait, so I'm sorry, I wasn't even looking at the chat while I was pontificating there. Wait, so now we can watch the watchers. Exactly, Jeff. Now we can see who's watching us. But for those of you who don't want people to know, because I did actually get one email from somebody who was very concerned about their privacy, and I get it. There's some people whose galleries you follow that you're not friends with, or that you're in competition with, and you don't want them to know that. Sorry for that being added. And you don't want them to know that you're actually following or have any interest in what they're collecting. So rather than allowing you to have the option to pick and choose, I'm going to let Harry know that I'm following him because Harry and I are friends, and I want him to know that I'm doing him a solid. But Mike Berkey, I don't want him to know that I'm following his gallery, so I can't do that. Well, it doesn't work that way. It's an all or nothing. So if you really don't want one person, or that means you have to say, basically set it so that no one will ever know that you're following them or watching them. You go to your profile, which is underneath the admin menu, and there's an option to opt out of displaying on the Watched Me page. So that's how it works. So Kavi, F37 watching, wasn't sure if that's high or low. That's a little bit lower than me, but come on, I'm the number one ID CAF user. So for the amount of time you've been on CAF 37 is a fine amount. And God bless America. Thank you, Pablo. And yes, we all like to watch. So how can I unwatch a gallery? It's in the same place where you click watch a gallery. Once you're watching it, it's up. You go to any place in the room, or at least definitely on the main page of the room. At the top gray bar, there is the heart icon, and you can say unwatch this gallery. But you can also unwatch a gallery from your main watch page that as well, or there's a link to do it from there. At any rate, it's a convoluted process in some ways, but when you're on a gallery, it works just fine. And so Michael, you're still popular in my book. Don't worry about it. Because the thing is, a lot of the stuff that I saw after we turned that on was that people were reciprocating the watches, right? You're like, oh, cool. Kavi follows my gallery. That's awesome. I'm going to go follow his, or vice versa. And, I think that this is, well, some people don't want to other people know about them following other people or watching their gallery. I think by and large, majority of us, it's going to provide a better sense of community when you're knowing who's following you, and it's cool to know who's interested in your collections and to reciprocate, because it might be a collector that you're not familiar with. So for me, it's just another way to explore and just enjoy the hobby in a different way through CAF that you weren't able to do before. So yeah, I know everybody. So yeah, now that I've cleared I didn't want to wait till Thursday to go over all of that. But certainly, if you don't want people to know, that you're watching their gallery, you can opt out of it. So that Maureen added it. I had actually forgotten that she was going to add it. So the first person, the only person that emailed me about it, I said, well, we'll probably add it. And then I talked to Maureen, and she's like, well, duh, it's been there since it launched. So at any rate, and so what will happen if someone is, so if the count, Kavi, your count is 37, you might go to it tomorrow, and it'll say 37 on the dashboard. But when you click to go see who's watching it, tomorrow it might say 36 people watching, but one person is anonymous. So it will at least, so the counts jive. I wanted to make sure that we were descriptive enough so that you didn't look at it and say, wow, it says 37, but when I count them all, there's only 36. So that will update at the top of the who's watching me page and let you know how many people have chosen not to let you know that they're watching you. So that's the weird part. I mean, at the end of the day, if you want to feel creepy about it, but it's not. At the end of the day, I get it. Privacy is very important. It's why I never wanted it to be an issue to begin with, and why I never showed who was watching you to begin with. But that's out there, and I'm sure I'll get a few more emails about it, and it's okay. But hey, I've got a great guest, someone who's been in the chat numerous times since we've been doing these shows for the last year and several months. So I wanted to bring Harry Mendryk into the chat tonight. Hey, Harry, how are you?
Pretty good.
Well, it's nice to finally meet you. I mean, I've seen you in the chat many times, so it's all your comments have always been very appropriate. And so I don't know where my list was, but you were one of the people. I had like a list of 5 or 6 people whose names I'd seen for a while that I wanted to get on the show. So you're the first person from that list that I've managed to book a date with. So I'm really glad that we were able to set this thing up tonight.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Fantastic. So well, there's lots to talk about. And but I wanted to. Well, maybe I should wait. But no, I'm going to show it to you.
No, you should wait on that. Wait on that.
All right. I'm going to set it down. All right. So because we need to get to the nitty gritty of how you got started in this hobby, because I know you've been a collector for a very, very long time, and and I know what your focus is, and I'm very curious about how you got started with that. I mean, and you could give me a little bit of a scoop on comics and what really got you into this collectibles niche in the first place. But I'm really curious about how that focus was for you early on, and why you chose those 2 creators to be your primary focus collecting.
So when I was young, I was a Marvel junkie. I had tried DC earlier, and frankly, I found them boring, so I dropped them. And then I switched over to the Marvel pre-heroes, the monster comics. Mm-hmm. And I enjoyed them, but after a few months, I guess they found a little repetitious. And so I sort of stopped on that too. And because of that, I missed the actual start of the Marvel universe, but not by much. I picked up, I think, on Fantastic Four issue number 3 is where I started. And as soon as I read that, it was different. I was a Marvel junkie. I don't think modern readers could understand how different that was at the time for us. I was in suburbs of New Jersey at that time, and so finding the comics was a little hard. You had to go a lot of different places. There were no newsstands and obviously no comic book stores. So you had to go to a number of places. So I continued reading comics, but when I got into college, after a while, it dwindled down. And by the time I finished college, I was stopped reading. Not that I felt there was anything bad about comics, it just wasn't on my list. And for not quite exactly sure why, in the very early 90s, I was just curious, well, how comics were doing. And that was a time with eBay, Comic Cons. There were a lot of Comic Cons in New York. And I got back into it. Now, of course, nostalgia is the big thing for most collectors. So while I was collecting comics, my main thing was Captain America. I would collect Captain America comics. And I did that for some time. But when I'm going to these cons, looking for Captain America, every so often I would see one of these Simon and Kirby comics. Now I knew about Simon Kirby, but from my early years, I never saw them when I was young. So Simon and Kirby comics, and I said, boy, these are great. And I kept seeing them. And then finally, I said, no, man, I got to collect these. These are really great. And I started a project where I decided I was going to digitally restore all the line art for all the Simon and Kirby covers. And that was my big project, and I would collect the comics. Eventually, I did do it. I collected all the Simon Kirby covers. I scanned them. I did a digital restoration of line art. And I made them into some books. How easy it is to see. Oops.
Now, were those books, you made them for yourself? Or
I made them for myself.
Yeah.
Yes. Because they're Simon and Kirby, a lot of that stuff was copyright.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not something I could sell.
Right.
So I made.
Well, but you did it so professionally. That's why I had to ask.
Yeah. Yes. You know. I did the printing, the binding. I did all that myself. Wow. I made about 24 copies. It's a double volume set. I made 24 copies, and from that came some things that I might digress a little bit. But one of the things that came out of that was that I started. Since I'm getting all these comics, I started to actually study Simon and Kirby, and they were not just artists. They had their own production house. They would package complete comics for a publisher, and then get a percentage of the fee. So I started to study them as just a subject matter, and that led into what I created, a Simon and Kirby blog, which I ran for about 5 or 6 years.
And what year was that you started the blog?
Huh?
What year did you start the blog?
Boy, I don't remember, 95, 96.
Okay.
Something like that. Yeah,
very
95.
early.
Probably.
I mean,
yeah,
I was just starting to make my own websites around 95, 96. So
yeah, but the blogs, they had software for that. So I mean, once it got past a little bit, it wasn't that hard.
Mm-hmm.
The blog is still being still there at the Jack Kirby Research and Museum. And there actually, if you go to my CAF Gallery, I got a link to it at the bottom. You get a place where you have links, and I have a link to that guy. So that was the one ramification. The other ramification was, while I'm doing this, sometimes Joe Simon would show up at convention. When first time he did that, I would show him what I was doing. And that led into a friendship with Joe. And I would show him what I was doing, and every time I would get new covers restored, I would show him. But like I said, I was also studying the comics, so every time I would find some early Joe comic story, I'd scan it and show him what I found. And initially, when I was doing those projects, the only printers really available were black and white. And that's why I really chose to do the line art, because it was black and white. But by the time I got friendly with Joe, there were color printers available. So I also started doing restorations of some of the interiors, color-wise. And again, I made up books that I would show to Bo. Where basically, I make a book, and I make 2 copies, with all the art that's in there. And one copy would go to Joe, and Joe would add art to my copy.
Right.
This one is poking fun at me.
Mad Scanner.
Mad Scanner, yes. But what we did with those is Joe started saying, well, let's see if we can get this stuff reprinted. Mm-hmm. And it took a little while, but eventually he found an editor, Steve Saffel, and Steve got Titan to publish the stuff. And that was the start. I did all the restoration for the Titan books. Now, you have one of them because you showed me before, the Best of Simon and Kirby. But there's also 4 others, what they call the Simon and Kirby Library. This is a superhero one. There's a horror one, a crime one, and a science fiction one. And I did all the restorations.
Wow.
And so that's the end of my little digression on
So
this.
that's why I was going to show off my book. So it wasn't anything super crazy, but it was funny. I was like, I better brush up on my Simon and Kirby before I have our conversation tonight. And I turned the page and I'm like, oh, well, this is the guy who contributed a great amount to this particular book. So I picked this up in San Diego a few years ago, and it was
that is particularly unusual because it's one of those rare occasions that we actually got permission for copyright stuff from both DC and Marvel, and only because of Joe.
I was going to ask you, how that managed. You guys
only because of Joe.
Publication.
Yeah, I don't think anybody else would go along with that sort of thing, but they both were very happy to help Joe along with it.
Wow, that's fantastic. So there was a question earlier, like when you got back into comics in the 90s, what did you still have your comics from when you were buying them as a youngster?
No, when I finished college, I kept maybe a dozen or so what I consider the key issues.
Mm-hmm.
But the rest, I let go. And that, in fact, when I was leaving the house, my brother was a couple years older than me. And he had already left the house. And when I was leaving his house, I went upstairs to what used to be his old room. And there was an attaché case filled with all the Spider-Man, right back from Amazing Fantasy number 15. And I'm saying, should I take those? And I say, well, maybe my brother will come back. Well, they all got thrown away.
Oh, no. That's horrible.
Yes. And because we were kids, what I kept is all very low grade. I mean, only have them for sentimental reasons. They're really terrible copies. But that's what I kept.
They're yours. Yeah,
yes,
no, I don't
they were mine.
Wow. So
the other thing,
original art. When did the art come into all this?
Okay, so the other thing about doing the books, the line art, was, you used to seeing comics with the color, but when I started working on line art, I started to realize, gee, the line art itself is so beautiful. And particularly about Simon Kirby. When we show some of the examples of Simon Kirby, you get an idea of what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. So that clued me in. I'm going to these comic shows. I saw the art. I understood what it was. But initially, because I was buying the comics, I thought, gee, the art's expensive. I don't know if I want to get into that. But one day at work, let's say it's on my lunch hour. We'll say that. I'm looking through the internet, and some of the I don't know who they were, but there was this one early website that had comic book art, and they had the cover for Dakota North, the first issue of Dakota North. It's one of the ones I enjoyed. I found out it after I came back to comics, but I enjoyed it. So, and it wasn't that expensive. So, okay, I got to get that. And that was the hook. Once that happened, and that, okay, now I'm going to get Simon and Kirby, and then I got into it that way. That happened I'd say about 95, 96 is when I started to get into that.
Now, out of curiosity, though, not to switch back, but like scanner-wise, what were you using to do all the work that you were doing early on?
They had at the time. They had these. They weren't the big scanners. They were good for 8.5, 11, or that size. I don't remember which make. So the scanner wasn't the problem. The problem really was the printer. Even the black and white printers. The one I had got was very expensive. That was the problem. And I was already familiar with Photoshop, so it worked well for me. Getting into that.
Right. I mean, I think I got my first Mac probably around 96, and I used Photoshop and had a scanner for that. But yeah, okay, all right. So we got that. So now back to the art. So after you got the Dakota North piece,
yeah. So I could Dakota North, and that got me into and yes, Simon Kirby. Most of it was eBay or New York Comic Con conventions. The main one was the Big Apple. At that time, they were in the basement of the St. Paul's Church. And Albert Moy would be on one side, and Conrad, I forget his last name, was on the other side. And there was one of the guys whose name I never can remember that was sort of like in the middle and the back. And Dick Ayers used to always be there too. And those were where I would get my different art, mostly. And then, of course, eBay. I did a lot on eBay.
Yeah, Conrad Eichenberg or Eichenberg.
Yeah, I think that's.
Yeah. I had worked with him early on, but yeah, I don't know what happened to him. I did a lot of website work for him when I first got into the hobby and was doing that. But yeah, no, that's so that was fun. So Albert, boy, he was pretty young at that.
Yeah, he was pretty young. A lot of times when I bought art from him, if it was like a Simon Kirby, they tended to be a little more expensive, and I'd have to pay it on the time payment. So I would, meet him different places to give him some of the money. And one time I gave it. I don't know if it was girlfriend or wife at the time. I don't know, but it was back then. She was working down in Lower Manhattan. I remember going down to her and giving her money.
So time payments have been around for a long time.
Yeah, Albert was good with me for that. Some of the stuff I could not have purchased with what I had on hand.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So then you were very focused with the Simon and Kirby art.
I would pick up other stuff occasionally.
Okay.
Yeah, I would. If you look at my galleries, what I put in the earlier days, there was other stuff in there, but yeah, mostly Simon and Kirby, and the other stuff. It depended. I did have my nostalgia for Jack Kirby, Silver Age, particularly Cap was my favorite. So I did have that nostalgia, but unfortunately, that stuff, even at the time I was going in, was a little bit more expensive. So that was a little tough. So other art that I would buy would be less appreciated artists even then.
So at that point, then, so how did you really make the kind of the leap to where you felt like you've collected enough Kirby, or have you never gotten to the point where you feel like you've collected enough Kirby and
well, when I retired, my salary position changed, and at that time, the Simon and Kirby prices were also getting a bit rich.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a little bit. I had a big, nice war chest, and I went on one last splurge. John Burke had an auction.
Yep.
I hit that real hard for stuff that I really wanted, and I'll talk about that also a little bit later. And after that, I said, "Yeah, I got a pretty good Simon and Kirby collection. I'm going to hold off." I started selling my comics. And that gave me some more nest eggs. And so I decided at that point to hit some of the, I guess, late 80s, early 90s artists that I really, really liked, that were still kind of expensive, but that I really liked. And so I wanted to get some examples of those. And after that, I said, gee, maybe I'm going to stop collecting, but I didn't. I just switched to cheaper, less known artists.
Sure.
Because I still enjoy the collecting. I still enjoy the art.
Right. No. I mean, I get it. I mean, you've got one of the bigger Kirby collections on CAF, that's on display, and I've always appreciated that. So that's why I was curious. It's like when is enough enough? I mean, we talk about that a lot on here, right? It's just like one more. You just want to get, there's just that. You'll see another one that you just really want to have, and so you'll find.
Well, there was a one more that I picked up fairly recently.
Yeah.
And there's always, I'm still selling. I've done really good with my comics with COVID. Mm-hmm. I mean, they really jumped, and so I'm hoping to put one last war chest just in case some must-have Simon and Kirby piece comes up. Maybe a Fighting American splash page or something like that. But other than that, no, I'm very happy with my collection. I don't need, 10 dozen of every cover, or is it? No, I'm happy with it. And that's how it's going to be for a while, I think.
No, I don't blame you on that. So, but I mean, with the way things have been going, I mean, there's been a lot of nice Kirby pieces coming on the market since COVID, I think. I mean, as far as maybe not from his earliest period, but so it's got to be tempting sometimes.
Oh well, the Silver Age Kirby, it's a bit.
Yeah.
Particularly if you look at my galleries, what I'm really interested in are splashes and covers. When I do my Silver Age, when we talk about that, you'll see most of that's panel pages because that's what I could afford back then, and even those were a little expensive, But So yeah, and you know, the Silver Age Kirby splashes and covers. I mean, I'm nowhere near. I can't handle that. I mean, that's just way. I can admire them, you know, and such. God bless the people who pick them up, but no, I can't handle that.
So, so after your experiences with Joe Simon, I mean, who would be the creator who you've had the most fun experiences with, as far as meeting at shows or buying art from?
Well, we'll talk about her, but in a way, I was debating whether I should include a piece of work by her. Mm-hmm. But Cahill picked her as one of the artists a couple of weeks ago, but that's Danny. Mm-hmm. She's one of the newer artists, and I think she's marvelous. I mean, I got a couple covers and a couple splashes from her. I think she's terrific.
No, I agree. I absolutely agree.
I'm also a big fan of Stan Sakai, Usagi Yojimbo. And recently, they've been reprinting some of his stuff, earlier stuff, colorized versions, and having other artists do the covers. And I've been picking up some of that stuff too. I just like other versions, other interpretations of Usagi. Mm-hmm. I like that.
So, I mean, so with the books that you put together, I mean, when you printed 20 of them, what did you do with them? Did you give them to friends? Did you?
Well, like I half went to Joe, because he would also, that was my idea. I gave half to Joe, and he signed the other ones. And yeah, there were some people that helped me on my project, and there were other people, you know, like I gave a copy to the to the Jack Kirby Research Museum, mm-hmm. and people and friends. Yeah, and right now I only have a few left. They all basically went, you know, to somebody or other. Yes.
Right. Well, that's just, I mean, I think it's just so cool, because it's, you know, you made these collectibles you know, just because of your love for the artwork and the stories. And I just think that's fantastic. I mean, you know, if you saw Dino's interview, Dino has made books of his art collection so rather than taking the art to shows, he can take these books, and I just find that fascinating and just a fun way to enjoy the hobby. And I mean, you clearly were doing something to preserve the artwork and the stories, but I just love the idea of kind of making that kind of a craft out of it.
And so they must have been appreciated, because I've never seen one come on the market. You know, so.
Right. Well, that's just it. I mean, you know, up until we talked about it, I really didn't know. I mean, I knew about that book, but I wasn't really familiar with the ones that you had mentioned. They were the ones that you had done yourself. So, and that's true. It's a testament. That's like seeing a CFA APA on eBay. They don't come up very often. I mean, people cherish them when they get them, and because they are something that they're irreplaceable. So wonderful. So why don't we look at some artwork from your collection? I know that I put the link in there earlier, and I've been actually browsing your CAF gallery and just wondering, it's like, wow, why didn't you pick that piece? You know, as I look through it, I see the CAF 197 cover, and you know, there's just so many amazing pieces in your CAF gallery, and you've been a member for I think since 2006, 2005. So
yeah, but I have to admit, I knew about it earlier. I started 2006. I was curious. I checked my comments, and it turned out I really only started commenting around 2017. So the earlier stuff, I used to go in, but I think what I was doing was always going, well, let's see who's got new Kirby pieces, and let's see if anybody's picked up a Joe Simon piece. Right. So I wasn't as active as I've been the last few years.
Well, COVID's made us all more active on CAF. I think
yes.
At the end of the day, you know, we've all focused a lot more attention there. Mike had a question from here. Did you ever get a chance to meet and talk with Jack Kirby?
No, never met Jack, unfortunately.
No. That's too bad. Correspond with him at all, or
no? I was, like I said, that was. I think when I started getting into the Simon Kirby, I think he had already passed away. So,
yeah, that's what I was thinking around that same time frame, but. You never know. I mean, if you were frequenting a lot of New York shows, you might have had an opportunity.
Well, I didn't. See, when I was young, I was in New Jersey. New York was a big trip. You know, I didn't do that often, so I never went to Comic-Con when I was young. So I never had that chance. And then after college, there was a fairly long period where I wasn't paying attention to comics. So nope.
Right.
Missed my opportunities.
See, when I got out of college in '91, so I missed the '90s. That was right as I got out of college. I couldn't afford. I got out of comics because I was trying to get jobs and whatnot, and I didn't get back into comics until about '98, '99, and then immediately fell into art like right after that. But yeah, it's kind of funny, right? I mean, it that sort of happens once you have to, when you're confronted with life, you forget about those things that you really enjoyed, and then if you're lucky, it comes back. So, I mean, we're all fortunate for that. So yeah, why don't we look at some artwork though? I mean, and I do hope people continue to browse your CAF gallery and leave comments and likes. And, that's one of the greatest things about doing these shows is the attention that everybody's CAF galleries get, during the show and after the show. So I would encourage everybody to do that this evening. So let me see. First artwork that I have here.
So this is a piece by Joe Simon. But there's a little bit of story behind this thing. Kirby fans would probably recognize George Rosas as one of the inkers during the Silver Age that Jack worked on Jack stuff. But he had a long history as a comic book artist, both as a penciler and inker. And he was one of the earliest fanboys. He had what was probably the first sketchbook of comic book art. He would go around. He worked for the DC at the time. He got all these DC artists and even some of the writers to sign, give him art, make sketches. And most of them are nice sketches. They're usually pencil sketches. And I have Jack's version, but Joe went whole hog. And I just get a kick out of it. Simon and Kirby would punch out Hitler in the Captain America #1 cover, but that wasn't enough for Joe. Joe had to poke fun out of Hitler too. And so this piece doesn't get much attention, but historically it's really something, and I think it's a terrific piece also. Shows Joe's humor.
So that looks like it was in some kind of a binder?
It was in a notebook or something like that. I don't really know what was in, because what happened was it was kept together and then it was put on auction in Heritage, just broken up on Heritage. So I don't know exactly what it looked like as a book, but they all have those 2 punches on them.
Okay, Michael Finn asks.
Rosas, yes, that's
right.
his sketchbook.
Here you go. Yeah, Inky was famous for his sketchbook. Great book.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael. Just had Michael on the other week.
Yes, great show.
It was. Well, I had a feeling, there's not we need more collectors of that period. Well, probably you guys don't need more collectors of that period, but that just would make the competition all the more fierce. But because that's an area that I don't have any golden age artwork. Though I go over to Berkey's a bit, so I've seen some stuff that I'm very interested in picking up at some point. Some Black Cat stuff. I mean, I've seen a few things that someday maybe I will add to my collection.
Okay, so this is Pocket Comics #4. This was published by Harvey. This is one of the first comics that Harvey published. And Joe, as I'm told, did the art for free as a favor to Harvey. So the idea of this comic that Harvey had was he was going to make a comic that was about half the size of a normal comic and make it 100 pages. And that would be the thing that would, sell. You would get more for your 10 cents. And they did terrific. But the only problem was they were very easy for the kids to put in their pockets and walk away without paying for it.
Oh.
And so they lost money. But I love the art that Joe did on this. He did the inking and the penciling. But, I think it's a great example of how comic book art differs from standard art. They do things that really aren't realistic. They couldn't happen in life. Like the Patriot, the Spirit of 76, he punches somebody, but the guy he punches is behind him. How could he hit him like that from behind? Black Cat is breaking through a window in the middle of the room, yet she's reaching and grabbing the Nazi's arm to prevent him from stabbing. And the Nazis in the back room. The depth wouldn't allow that.
Right.
But all together, it tells a story, and it's a great story. Now, also remember, the comics were pocket size. They were half the size of normal comics. The art was done at that time twice the size of the comic, but because this is a pocket size, the art is not as big as the normal Golden Age cover art. But I still like it. This is my earliest piece of comic book art. Joe did this at the same time he and Jack were working on the 10th and final issue of Captain America.
Wow. I mean, this is absolutely beautiful. And you know, it's like we've talked about it a lot, the idea that, you know, you always have to try to keep the characters facing the audience.
Yeah.
So that's how you get these odd perspectives and things that shouldn't be physically possible, but that's what that's what makes the characters more identifiable, because they're facing outward, and at the same time it makes for a very dramatic image here. So this is beautiful, and the fact that it still exists. So when you say that this is smaller than a normal twice up because it was done for a pocket comic, I mean, is it more like 12 by 18, something around there?
Yeah, something like that. I don't remember measuring, but yeah, it's something like that. Now, there's also a little story behind this one. Now, they had this first came up in one of the earlier Heritage auctions, one they actually had in New York City.
Oh, wow.
And in that auction, there were going to be two pieces that I wanted. I wanted this one, and there was another Harvey cover that Kirby penciled. And I really wanted both. And so I decided I had an issue of Captain America Comics #1. It was a restored comic, but it was really good shape. I figured, I got to get some money up. So I put it on eBay. It sold for half what I got paid for it.
Oh.
But I got together some money, and I said, I still hopeful I can do it. And I went to the auction, and the Kirby piece came up first. And as I was bidding up, I suddenly realized I don't have enough money for both these pieces. I can't get both. So I decided to pursue the Kirby, and I got that. But as I suspected, I just, with leftover money, I didn't have enough money for this. And that always bothered me. I made some attempts to offer for the person who got it. They were not interested. But when I retired, this was one of the pieces that was in the John Bird collection that came up. And it was like, you don't get many chances for a second try at something you wrote for like that. And I'm really happy that I managed to get it this time.
Well, that's a great story. I mean, you hear that a lot, right? People who missed out,
Yeah.
But then when the second opportunity comes around, even if it costs 3 times as much as it did originally, you know, you have to go for it, because those opportunities don't happen too often.
Yeah.
When was the Bird collection auction?
That was 2 or 3 years ago, I think.
Right. I think it was fairly
maybe 4
recently.
years ago. Maybe 4 years ago.
Okay. Well, I mean, congratulations on that one. I mean, I love that. I love that style, and like somebody else mentioned, at first when I first saw it, I thought it was Kirby, and then I was like, and then just looking at it and then checking out the CAF, I was like, all right, I get it. But that's just a really, really beautiful artwork and a piece of history right there. At the end of the day, I mean, done during the 10th issue of Captain America.
Captain America,
wow.
Same time. And I couldn't afford a Captain America cover if it existed.
Right, exactly. No, we totally get that. All right, let's look at another piece here.
Okay, well, like I said, I couldn't afford a Captain America cover while it existed. This is Captain Freedom, but this was signed. I don't know if you can see it on the scan, but it was signed by Glavin. And when I was doing my Simon and Kirby covers, I was aware of this comic. But I would search for Glavin. I couldn't find any Glavin. So I kind of knew it was a pseudonym. But to be honest, the style didn't quite meet Jack or Joe. But I wasn't sure what to make of it. Now, like I said, I used to visit Joe, and I would bring him every so often. If I'd find some of his early work, I'd bring him to him and show him copies. And one time I showed him copies of Daring Mystery #2. Joe had 2 stories in it. And I said, well, Joe, one of them isn't signed by you. It's signed by a different name. And Joe says, I bet you I know what the name is. Gregory Sykes. And he said, the story he said was when they were in high school, he had a bunch of friends and they all had aliases that they would use. And then when he went, when he went to do his work in comic books, he would sometimes use those aliases. And so that's Gregory Sykes was his alias as a kid.
Wow. And
then as he's reading through this one of these Daring Mystery stories that he worked on, he said, "Oh, look, here's another alias." He used one of his friend, Nelson Glavin. And as soon as he said that name, I said, "Now I know that's Joe's. That's his old alias."
And he was just doing it for fun. Or was he trying to hide the fact that he was?
No, this was just one of the characters in the story. I mean, so
yeah,
it was just fun. So both Joe and Jack did a bunch of Harvey covers after they got past the pocket size disaster. They were still helping Harvey, and even the comics I used to treasure. They were very hard to find, very rare, and usually very low grade. But it's just magic that Harvey kept so much of that stuff, and that still exists. And like I said, if this was Captain America, if this was done at the same time that Simon and Kirby were working for DC, I couldn't afford a DC cover. I mean, they're just way out of my reach. This was tough, but I managed to do it.
Well, some sacrifices have to be made, right? No, that's another fantastic piece. In fact, Michael mentioned it might have been from the Burke collection as well.
Yeah, that's the Burke. That was, yeah.
Wow, amazing, and a great story to go along with it.
So this is Simon Kirby doing crime, and headlines number 25. I forget the date, but probably 48, something like that. And you can see at the top, it's made out to Wigrinsky. Both of those are early signatures. They're not something added later. That's Joe's signatures and Jack's signatures done at the same time. At that time, it was one of the things that people were attacking comics. It's no good for kids, the making juvenile delinquents. And Wigrinsky, even though he was a kid, wrote a terrific defense article. I think it was in, I forget what magazine, Esquire or something like that. And he was actually a big fan. And so either because of that article that they gave him this one, or I kind of really think he actually put ads in Popular Mechanics and Popular Science searching out for comic book art. He was also another one of the early fans. And maybe that's Joe saw that and sold him a copy. But I love their crime work.
Oh yeah, without question.
So this is penciled by Jack, and I think this inking is Joe.
Well, but you can see why images like this might concern parents of the age, right? You are corrupting the youth, showing a guy planting a gun in the man's hand after he's already been shot in the head. So, yep, just committed suicide. Poor guy.
Barbaros Chaswick.
But I love crime stories as well, and so that piece is wonderful. I mean, and out of curiosity, I mean, so do you display artwork in your home? Do you keep it all in portfolios? What's
right now I have about a dozen pieces up on my wall, but the rest is in. I have my modern stuff are in portfolios, but the Simon Kirby stuff were mostly done on illustration boards. And so that I got flat files for those.
That's a wise thing to do. All right, let's look at another one here.
Okay, romance. I know romance doesn't get much love nowadays for collectors. But
No.
But when Simon and Kirby were the ones that started that genre by young romance, and when they worked from the time they started, which was in '47, until the time they split, roughly '56 was the final stuff that Jack did with Joe. They actually did more art of romance art than all other genres combined. That was their moneymaker. That's where they made their money. But very little of it survived. And most of the time, especially in the early ones, they did this bit where you call it like confessional, where the splash waves would tell, the confession, and part of the confession would be the title, Hands Off Lucy. And I actually think the splashes were a little bit racier than the covers, and I think they did that on purpose. They didn't want to draw too much attention from the more adult world, when they knew when the kids saw it that they would draw it in. As far as I know, this is the only romance confessional splash that survived. And for me, this is one of my what do they call those pieces?
The Grail?
Grail. This is one of my Grail pieces. I knew who had it, and I always wanted it. And eventually I bit the butt and made an offer I guess that they felt they couldn't refuse.
So this never made it onto the market when you picked it up. You were able to...
Yeah, the guy bought it off with Kirby's himself.
Oh.
So yeah, it was never on the market. And he had it for a number of years, yeah.
So West was asking what was why did Jack and Joe split?
Around 1954, they decided to make, they used to produce things for other publishers. They decided they wanted to publish themselves. And they made an arrangement with the distributor. And they started their mainline comics. And that was Bullseye, Foxholes, Police Trap, and In Love. That publisher was also the publisher for EC. The distributor was also the distributor for EC. And that's when they had the Senate hearings on the comic books as causing juvenile delinquency. And that EC was the main target of that. And they hit EC so hard that the distributor folded.
Wow.
So then they went and tried to take their line, and they tried to find somebody else. They went to Carlton. Well, Carlton was famous for not paying for much. And they published the last bit of this, whatever work they had, and that was it. Then they decided, they had one idea, Challengers of the Unknown. They took it to DC. And DC said, yeah, we'd like to do it, but we don't take the same deal we used to have with you. We're not going to split profits. We just want it at page rates. And guess what? Our page rates aren't, that great.
Of course.
And Jack felt he had to take it, and Joe felt he had other things. And Joe gave Jack his blessing. Fine, you take it. And they published the Challenger. Joe went off for other stuff, and that was. They did some work after that. Joe would come up with something for Harvey, and that he would reach out to Jack, and Jack was always willing to give a hand. But they didn't have that common studio, and they didn't have what the Simon and Kirby art style anymore.
I mean, that's too bad. That was the thing that really broke up their relationship.
Yeah.
Oh, but I mean, for Kirby in its own way, it was it was a unique opportunity for him. I can see why he probably wouldn't want to pass that up.
Well, I mean, they both had families to deal with. They had to support, so they had to do something. And that was a tough time for comics. The titles were dropping off like flies at that point. So some place like DC, that was a good place to go. And even though it wasn't great compared to what they used to get, as far as the comic book publishers at the time, DC rates were still pretty good. Mm-hmm. Just not what they were used to, when they were making their own stuff and getting a profit of the royalties.
Right, and doing that extra fulfillment work and that sort of thing. I mean, yeah, well, when you're young, you can do a lot of those things. I'm sure that, like you just said, as they had families and things and obligations, it just made more sense to go the other route. And I actually I didn't read that period of Challengers, so I mean, somebody asked if was Jack writing it as well or at all during that.
The first issue, as my understanding, was a Simon and Kirby. I don't know who did the writing, but typically when Simon and Kirby had another writer do the writing, when they sat down to do the art, they changed stuff. They changed writing. So I don't know if that was the same thing with the Challengers, but I think after like certainly by the third issue, I think it was DC writers doing it. I don't think Jack was writing it.
Sure. All right, let's look at some more art.
So this is a splash from Police Trap, and this is a good example of what got me so excited about Simon and Kirby. Simon and Kirby had developed an inking style that was pretty unique, and if you look at it, I mean, it captures all the thing there. But if you look at the brush strokes, they're really strong. You know, very obvious. I kind of think that was there was a reason for that, because some of the comic book publishers at the time, the printers, were really bad. And if you had fine line artwork, it could disappear or fill in. So I really think they were trying to make sure that when they get printed, even a bad printing would come out well. But it just, for me, it's just magical. You can look at the image, and if you look closely at details, the image could disappear, and you can just look at sort of abstract patterns. So that's what drew me into the Simon Kirby. Unfortunately, there's a bad story about this particular piece of art.
Okay,
this is one of the pieces I got off of eBay. And it wasn't a bad price. I was happy with the price. The guy shipped it using foam board. And never use foam board. It feels like it's got a certain amount of strength, but once you get to a critical point, it weakens it. And so this thing folded, and there's a crease on that art. You don't see it very much on the scan, and even when it's on my wall, it's not too obvious. But still, it damaged it. I feel really bad. I guess I probably could have sent it back and got mine back, but I just wanted the art. You know, there's nothing. I couldn't replace it with anything else. You know, that's one piece. That's what we love about comic art. There's just one piece. So I kept it, but don't use foam board. It's my theme.
Yeah, I can't even imagine using foam board to ship artwork. I mean, that's tragic. Did you ever think about trying to get it flattened or anything? Or
well, it's fairly flattened, but it's just a crease. There's just a crease.
Yeah.
You know, and like I said, most angles are the light, but if you put a low angle to light, it's just very obvious.
Well, you know, when I was setting up the slides for that one, I looked at this one probably the longest, just because I just kept getting drawn around and around to the policeman at the foreground talking to the old lady talking to the policeman in the background, taking people down to the cells probably. I mean, it was just a fun scene. I didn't even read what they were talking about. I just loved looking at the imagery and where the eyes of the characters were looking. I mean, that's great storytelling when there's those sorts of things in there, so much so that you literally have to look at the artwork more than once to really kind of take it all in and see what they were trying to do. I mean, that was a great piece.
And it's not obvious in the scan, but actually there's something unusual about that piece of art. It's actually 3 boards.
Really? I didn't notice that at all.
Yeah. And I think the reason is, I think it was originally meant to be a cover. And then they decided to make a splash. So they cut off the top where the title was. And of course, you know, because the bottom was probably close to the edge because it was a cover, you didn't need much on the bottom. They cut the bottom off, and then they added the tops and bottom sections to make it a splash. So at the top and the bottom of the art, there's actually a seam where the boards meet.
Right. I mean, I can kind of, now that I've got another window open where I'm looking, going in on the detail scan that you sent me, and I see it now. But yeah, it wasn't obvious before. That's very interesting.
Yeah. And because they were famous for, you know, a lot of times they might decide not to use a cover for whatever reason, but they were great at recycling stuff. They didn't throw it away. You know, they tried to find some other use for it.
Well, Samuel, I can honestly say in the comment there, I've not had to deal with damaged art yet coming to me or any that I've mailed. So I can be thankful for that. Let's see. Let's look at another piece here. Let's see this one next. Wonderful, wonderful piece. Yeah, I love this.
Strange Tales 114. Like I said earlier, I was a big Captain America fan. And everybody knows Captain America came back in Avengers 4. That is everybody but me. I remember as a kid when Strange Tale 114 came out, I became an instant Captain America fan. I just loved it. I loved the character, the design of this character. I loved what sort of stuff he could do with the shield and all that stuff. And so that's my nostalgia. But of course, but like I said, even at the time, they weren't exactly cheap. I mean, I could afford it. They weren't as bad. I didn't have to do monthly, you know, time payments on them, but they still weren't cheap, and there weren't that much. So I actually got 2 pages from this particular issue. This is one, and one item I bought from Albert. The other one I bought from Conrad. I don't remember which one is which. But about 5 or 6 years later, I said, you know, I got 2. Maybe I could use the money back. So I put one of them on eBay. But I said, I don't want to lose money. I'm going to put how much it cost me as a reserve.
It's wise.
The bidding didn't even come up to half what I paid for it. And to be honest, to tell you the truth, after that was all done, and I said, you know, I'm glad it didn't sell. I'm not going to do that mistake again.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Did you feel you overpaid when you originally bought it?
I know. I think no. I don't. I think people were looking for a bargain, and I think even at that time, Silver Age art like that was going for higher. I think that was that period where people weren't paying as much attention to eBay because there wasn't as that much of that stuff going on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so yeah, I don't think, and in fact, we'll see one of the other pages that I've got where I know Conrad had it advertised for much more than I paid from. So no, I think it was probably pretty fair.
Mm-hmm. So when you say Conrad had it advertised, was it in just mean at a show, or did he have it actually in a?
There's somebody has one of these web pages where he posts some of the old advertisements and catalogs people made, and he had one for Conrad, and I went through, and there it was. You know, he had one of these terrible, you know, thumbnail size Xerox, hard to see image, but right. I know that's the art I got.
Yeah, the good old days of comic art marketing.
And I didn't realize, I was surprised because at the time I bought it, you know, like a few months later, Conrad came back to me and said, "You want to sell that piece back?" I said, "No, I don't want to sell it back. I collect. I don't want to. I'm not a dealer." And I think he probably was doing it because probably somebody saw his ad later and said, "Hey, I'll buy that."
Right. No, that's those darn dealers. Like Marcus, who works with Albert, said he just jokingly said Albert always overprices his stuff. But yeah, right. I mean, at the end of the day, that's back then it had to happen a lot, right? You're picking up an ad that's a week old or whatnot, and they've already sold it, and sure, they've got somebody coming in. I'll give you double for it. Well, that's what dealers are meant to do. That's what they're good at, is getting the most out of their art, even if it meant buying something back, possibly. So, well, what are you gonna do? Let's see here. All right, another. This is the one I was just talking about from that I bought from Conrad. I mean, most of the ones I buy for the art. But I got to tell you, I love the dialogue on this every bit as much. It's just terrific.
And as an earlier example of Captain America, I don't know. I've just never seen anything I like as much from that very early Cap. It's just terrific.
No, this is, I mean, I love that top right panel. And it was, strangely enough, this is one of the few that you sent me where I read the dialogue on it, because I just thought, how can they be talking that much in this fight? And yet, so I wanted to know what they were saying. But yeah, you know, and you can, and it's like that I love the heavy line in that top right panel too. I mean, there's something about it, the page and the dynamic, you know, in the battle there. It's just beautiful. That whole, I even like the way the three panels are set up at the bottom, because, you know, you'd think a page like this might just be 3 rows of 2 panels each, and then breaking that up there at the end. I mean, you know, there's a lot of thought that goes into that, and maybe they needed to fill the dialogue in because it's dialogue heavy on that and those bottom 3 panels. But I love the way it's laid out as a full page. I just love the flow. I mean, and it's
the dialogue heavy. You got to remember how they did that. They had their Marvel methods at the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's Stan Lee. I don't think Jack expected him to put quite that much there.
So yeah, there you go. Dino mentions that no known original art from Avengers 4. So this is as early as it gets.
I think I've seen some Avenger 5 art.
Oh, okay.
But I don't know.
I wasn't aware of that either.
I think I've seen 1 or 2 pages from Avenger 5, but I've seen some from 6, but none like this. Some of the other ones, it's great. They have more of the other characters, but I like the fact that this is just Cap.
Right. No, this is marvelous. So was this a collector to collector pickup or something you?
This I bought from Conrad. This is the one I bought from Conrad.
Oh, that's what I'm sorry. This was the one from Conrad. Yep. Wow. Conrad always had good stuff.
Oh, he did. Yeah. And so did Albert. They both.
Oh, well, I mean, yeah. Great. Well, I didn't even have to say that. I mean, Albert, we already know. Yeah, but for people who haven't seen, I'd only seen Conrad at San Diego, and I think I probably saw him there 5 or 6 times. But he had a really, really nice set of art. I mean, I was always impressed going through his booth. Even it was just, you know, it wasn't like he had a lot, but everything that he had was just amazing. So, yeah. Wow. Well, all right. Next piece of art.
Okay, so like I said, I really couldn't afford much in the way of splashes and covers. I had a close call from Albert. One time, Albert had a Simon and Kirby romance cover, and the splash from Tales of Suspense '74. He had them both up, and they were both priced the same amount, and not cheap.
Right.
And the 74 is one of the ones that Kirby did the layouts, and Tuska did the finishing pencils.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking. I said to Albert, Tuska, look, Kirby layouts, but Tuska. And Albert says, look at it. That Captain America, that's Kirby. He was right. But you know, it was expensive, and I said, I don't know. In the end, I decided to just get the romance cover, and that was on one of the ones that I had to pay installments. I probably should have seen if Albert would have willing to go for a double installment, but I didn't. But later on, one of the times I was going to pay for one of my arts on installments, Albert brought this out and showed me this. Not even at a con, just on the street. He said, are you interested? And the price wasn't bad. It wasn't too bad. The thing is, all the villains and the background, that's all Kirby. Somebody came in and changed a lot of the Cap. At the time, the claim was made that was Steranko who did that. They asked Steranko. They didn't like the way something about the Cap. And if you look, there's this real odd composition where there's this sort of like oval area towards the lower right It's empty. But if you look, there's a smudge in there. That's where the cat's leg, Kirby put cat's leg. And then Kirby certain would never put a shadow on the right leg like it's in there. So like I said, the claim initially was this was Steranko doing this. Now, I think more recently, people are saying, no, we don't think it's Steranko. We think it's Romita who did this change. But still, it's as close as I can come to a Silver Age Kirby cover.
Wow.
And it is my most viewed piece in my collection.
Well, deservedly so.
Yeah.
I mean, it's yeah, no, that's a beauty. But it's funny, you said so he met you on the street. It sounds like Albert was just kind of hanging outside your house, waiting for you to exit.
Well, like I said, we made arrangement that we were going to meet someplace so I can give him some money as for something I was still trying to buy. And he pulled that out. I think he had a car. I'm not sure, but he pulled it. I don't remember the exact search night, but I remember him showing me this piece. Whoa, yeah. He said, I don't know if it's true, but I sort of remember him saying that it was originally from the Eastman collection. The Eastman had that museum that folded, and that was why it became available. I don't know if that's true.
I've been looking at it. Well, it's just an amazing image, and yeah, anybody who hasn't seen it in your CAF gallery, so they can look at it much closer, they should definitely do that because, like you say, the pencils in the background. I mean, and the villains. It's just a beautiful, beautiful example of Kirby pencil.
And at one point, I made a blue line print of it and had Joe Giella ink it just to see what what he would do with it. Changed it a bit, but still, it was just wanted to see.
Sure. No, that's pretty cool. And speaking of blue lines, we're going to be doing the blue line CAF University piece together, probably within the next week or two. We'll try to plot out how we're going to do that, and I'll send you some examples we were talking about earlier. But I'm looking forward to doing that with you. All right, let's look at this next one here.
Okay, Marie Severin. This is it was supposed to be the cover for Captain America 125. It got rejected. And usually when people say, a cover gets rejected, it's because they came up with they didn't think the art was good enough or sellable enough, and they wanted to try something else. But I don't think that's the reason in this case. I think the reason is because of that saying Vietnam, because this was still at the height of the Vietnam War, and there was a lot of controversy then. I think Stan didn't want to have that controversy. The story inside is still captured in Vietnam, but the cover changed. But anyway, even that's not true. I think she did a terrific job. And I love some of the margin notes. They were talking about make Captain America handsome, make the face like JK. It's just, so this I bought. This is one of the occasions where I sold a bunch of comics and I had a bit of a nest egg. And this came up at Heritage a few years ago. And I don't know what they call it, but the where you bid, it's during the live auction, but you're on the computer bidding. You're not actually there. Mm-hmm. So I'm bidding, and they have their increment stuff. It keeps going increment. And I finally get an increment, my bid, and I say, if he increments this, I'm out, because my increment over that is more than I want to spend on this. So finally, the increment comes back $1 more than my the guy I was bidding against was not live. He obviously did it earlier. He just put his maximum bid on.
Right.
Well, there was no way I was going to let somebody win out on the $1. So I did a cut bid, and it worked. So it was a little more than I kind of wanted to spend, but well, I can't let somebody beat me $1.
No, and you knew what your max was. So whereas other bidders wouldn't have known that potentially that you knew where it was at, and so you knew you'd probably be pretty safe, or at least you knew where you were going to be the high bidder with your cut.
Unless somebody decided to jump in, that was the only fear. Somebody jumped in.
Oh, yeah. Well, fortunately they didn't. Right?
No, they didn't.
That's Well, that's what's nice about the way that the Heritage has those auctions set up. I mean, I don't bid in too many of them, but I watch them, and I'm always it's a good, as a buyer and somebody who loves the hobby and loves watching prices. I love the dynamic of cut bids and just the excitement that kind of gives the auction and helps it carry on just a little bit longer. I mean, I know it's agonizing for those who are in it, but as someone who's just sitting on the outside as an observer, I really, really enjoy watching that.
Yeah, I watch them too. Yeah, especially if there's a Silver Age Kirby on there that I know I can't buy, but I just want to see what's going to happen. Yeah.
Right. Well, congratulations on that one. That is probably, somebody else mentioned it too. It's probably one of her best covers, and it's unfortunate it didn't see print. Let's see. I want to get the right one here.
Okay, so this is another one I bought from Conrad, Will Eisner. These are from Dennis Kitchen had a series of Will Eisner reprints that he had Eisner do new covers for. And so this was done in, I think, 89, I forget. And the actual art, most of the time nowadays, when they do covers, they do it like 50 or 60% larger. The art is 50%, 60% larger than the printed version. Will did this something like 25% bigger. It's really, when you see it, you say, boy, that looks small. But you look at this is brushwork. You look at the inking. It's just amazing how great he did. And of course, the whole composition, the whole art is terrific, but the inking is just so amazing. And I used to say amazing for such an old guy. But when I was getting ready to do this show, I said, wait a second. He was 71 when he did this. I'm 71. That's not an old guy.
Right, exactly. It's all about perspective. The older you get. Oh man. No, it's absolutely beautiful. The line works, absolutely fantastic. Dino mentions the Eisner bricks. Yep. Yeah, no, and I agree with the light loads. It's very smooth, fluid, graceful line work. Yeah, this is
there are only two places where he had to use whiteout. Well, had to. They're really tiny pieces of whiteout, so maybe had to is the wrong word because they were so small. I don't know why he bothered, but it's just an amazing piece of inking.
No, I could look at this one for a long time. Congratulations on this one as well. I mean, again, Harry, you've got a phenomenal collection and a wonderful eye. I mean, I love this piece. Sorry, I've got the big scans to look at while that's on the screen. I'm actually zooming in and looking at the larger one. So again, I encourage everybody to go check out your CAF Gallery where you can see proper scans of these versus being on the screen.
Well, I don't have the 2000 scans in my gallery, unfortunately.
Oh, no?
The only problem, the only problem with it, if you go 2000, the low-res scan that you first see is bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to see the whole art.
I get you. But I mean, they're going to be better than what I have here at the end of the day. And
yes,
I forgot. I did forget that you did it that way. That's why that's why I have the really nice scans.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying these. So.
Okay, so like I said, when I retired and sort of wrapped up most of my Simon Kirby's, and I was selling comics, I built up a war chest and said, there are some of the late 80s, early 90s artists that I just think were phenomenal. We're doing stuff that was just, I feel there's like Kirby back there. They looked at Kirby, but they went their way, and certainly Mike Mignola is one. And so I don't know what to tell you about this piece. The only nice thing about putting it up on CAF, Andy Robbins was one of the previous owner, and he emailed me and said, hey, would you like to know the provenance of this? So this is one of those few pieces of the more modern stuff that I actually know the full provenance of. There were like four other owners before me.
Well, that's, obviously that's really handy. That's one of the tricky things in our hobby is knowing the chain of ownership. I mean, I think it's, we've talked about that a lot. I think as the future, becomes more the present, I think there's going to be a lot of different ways that provenance will be established. But that's all we have today. You're lucky that somebody contacts you and say that I can give you this information, and it's so invaluable to have that, and to so yeah, I do feel like in the next 4 or 5 years we're going to see things change dramatically to help establish that and to track it better. I'm not saying that CAF will ever play a part in all of that, but I think that that's going to be something that most buyers are going to want to rely on and know that something's authentic. I think there's because we have enough problems already in the hobby today with forgeries and different issues. So establishing a chain of ownership is going to be tantamount to verifying an artwork's authentication. So, but I did actually skip one of the numbers here. But let's see. Yes, I did. Oh, look and see. And Dino even said about that piece. I didn't see if it recalls Kirby's from Fang Film. Yeah, sure, exactly. Let's see, and that was let's see, this one.
Well, like I said, 4 artists.
Yep.
And Frank Miller, he was certainly one of them. And I know historically, in terms of what it did to comic book industry, his Dark Knight was the best thing since Fantastic Four #1, as far as how it changed the industry. But for me, his Sin City work has always been the one I love the most. And so Mitch, I got this off of Mitch. Mitch, at one of the New York Comic Cons, he didn't have a table. He had sort of like some racks at the end of one of the aisle.
I remember when he did that. It was that was his protest booth. He just said, "Screw it! I brought my portfolio and I'm borrowing this chair and I'm gonna sit here and sell some art." Yes.
So I came up and I was literally probably seconds too late because he had a piece on that I know I would have bought. It was just terrific piece. But there was a guy that beat me to it. He was still there. And so I waited a long time for them to finish their conversation. I like the rest of the Miller art that was there, but if you're going to spend money, you really want to make sure that you get something that you want value, that you feel it's worth what you're paying for. So I told him that, and he said, well, you know what? Go back, find 6 pages from the Sin City that you like. So that's what I did. I went through all my Sin City books, found my 6 favorite pages, not the one that the other guy bought, but other than that, the 6 favorite pages. Yeah, the Lynn Valley.
Yep.
And I gave him a list, and this was one of them, and he had it. So I got it.
Wow. So you really lucked out. It wasn't something that he had the opportunity to really market on his site or even any other collectors. You just gave him a list of which ones you wanted, and he had one.
He had one.
Wow. Well, that doesn't happen too often. Were you surprised? I mean, when he came back and said, "I've got this."
Oh, I was surprised because Miller did a lot of pages. All those books, there's a lot of pages. I figured, gee. And I don't know how much. And at the time he was doing it, I didn't realize where this art was coming from. And prior to Mitch showing that stuff, you never saw Sin City art.
Correct.
Not from the comics itself. They all kept. So yeah, I was very surprised and very pleased. Yeah.
Well, that's a stunner. I mean that I would love to.
I think that's
what's that?
I think that's my most commented piece in my collection.
That would not surprise me at all. Let's see. Oh, another very nice Art Adams here.
Yes, Hart Adams is another one of my guys that I think really did a terrific job. But besides the fact that I liked his art, I really liked Monkey Man and O'Brien. But unfortunately for that series, I mean, it didn't last long. It wasn't popular. It was mostly a back up to Hellboy, And so when they were on the cover, they would just have this little circle that you would see Monkey Man and Brian's head. So there were very few covers. So for years, I kept my eye out trying to see anybody have one of these covers. Never found one. And then recently, this is one of the things that I guess is great for CAF. Somebody on CAF was decided to sell one. He didn't have it on his page, but I guess he had it and decided to sell it. And as soon as I saw it, yep, I'll take it.
I don't blame you. Hey, I want to say good night to Michael. Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, you should definitely make sure you watch the rest of the interview. Thanks for tuning in tonight, Michael. But yeah, no, that's sometimes searches pay off, right? You got to be patient for something like this. When there aren't many out there, sometimes the stars just have to line up for you. So I was reading through a couple extra comments here. What did Chris just say? These legend titles were coming out when I worked at a comic book store. Big nostalgia hit. Yep. As far as I've had many jobs in my life, I've always wished I had worked at a comic book store growing up. I worked at a Goodwill. I've worked in a lot of different retail, but never worked at a comic shop. So I'm envious of anybody who got to spend any time working for a comic book seller. Let's see. Couple more here.
Okay, now we're getting to my more recent stuff. Like I am a big fan of Usagi Yojimbo, Stan Sakai. Love his work. I have a couple other pieces, but all the pieces I had were the later stuff, and I love him. But he's one of those artists. I mean, you might not realize his style changed over the years, and I always wanted one of his early covers. And here's advice to people who have grails. This was another one of my grails, get an early cover. The guy who had it on CAF had it for many, many years. I've admired it for many, many years. I decided, let me see if I can give him an offer. Not fair market value, above fair market value. And he went for it. So this is, I think, if you talk about front covers that stand alone, this is the third Usagi cover that he did.
Wow. No, this is amazing. Well, that just shows that sometimes making a good offer at the right time can work out. There's patience. There's not lowballing. Sometimes just being upfront and fair, or sometimes more than fair.
Yeah, I was more than fair.
Yeah, can actually get a piece that you're really after. I think that because I hear I know a lot of offers are made on CAF every day, and a lot of times they're more disappointing. Or if they know you're a big fish, the reply back will be an offer that's twice as much as the art should probably sell for, right? When they know what your collecting habits are and that sort of thing. But no, I think when you make a really fair offer for something, that good things can happen. So that's great. I mean, how long had you been admiring it in the other person's gallery before?
Oh, he's had it. I think he had it since 2006 when I joined.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I mean, this is a long time. He had it in his gallery.
Well, then there you go.
Yeah.
No, well, that's amazing. Let me see. We only got one more piece of artwork to look at. I should have had you send more, but again, we'll be able to we'll direct everybody into your CAF gallery afterwards. But this is a real beauty too.
Yeah. So this is, I know, like I said, Khalil already talked about Danny.
Mm-hmm.
I think she's of the more recent artists. She's just terrific. I've got this cover, another cover, and two splashes. I mean, if you look at it, you might say, it's just a pretty girl. But she looks a little wistful, and the leaves floating by and such. And then you look at the background, and the silhouettes, the negative silhouettes, they're standing on a chain link fence. If you read the comics, they're a group of witches. And under a foot her foot, there's this leaflet that says missing. And the person on that photo that you can't see looks exactly like her. So Danny has captured all these elements for this story just beautifully. And the art itself is just terrific.
Yeah, no, it's a great work of art. I love it. Sorry, I'm looking at the larger scan. I'm sorry, everybody. I've been doing that for the whole time through here. But no, this is, yeah, you're right. Khalil had brought Danny up in the past, and I wasn't familiar with their work either until then. So no, that's.
Well, I got familiar from your first CAF Art Live. Some of her work was auctioned by Cadence.
Yep.
And I picked up one cover from that, and then I went to their site and said, "Oh, geez, these two splashes look pretty good." Yeah.
Well, see, Comic Art Live's done some good things. I sent Cadence an email earlier today too about one of the people that's going to be helping me with the panels for the show has been contacting some of their artists because we were Cadence isn't somebody that I've worked with on the panel side of things, so I made some inquiries today just to see if we can't get some of their creators to be in a panel or two, depending on how things work out. We were even asking about potentially getting David Lloyd and some people close to him to be on a panel. So hopefully I'll be able to work something out with Cadence because they have supported and had a booth, during Comic Art Live the first 3 shows. So they want to, and we've been pretty fortunate that way, I guess, to have a lot of support from the dealers and the reps for that show. But I always love hearing stories that people bought art at it.
Yeah.
Let's see. One of these days I'll actually make it so that it can push out announcements to the premium members too. I've got a month. I guess I could try to work that into all the different plans and things that we've got to do. Let's see. Tim.
Yeah, Danny lives in Greece. The art that I bought for that thing was during COVID. That was early in COVID. And so there were a long delay from getting the art from Greece to England, and then from England to the U.S.
Right.
So it took a while to take care of it, but that's okay. I didn't mind.
So how have you fared obviously you've used Comic Art Live to pick up some art. How is your collecting habits? How have you managed? Because you live in Manhattan, so clearly you've had a very different experience than me living in Northeast Ohio under COVID. But how did COVID really change your collecting habits and just I know that we've seen you in the chat, so I know that we've been watching a few of the shows, but what's that been like for you?
No, other than the Comic Art Live, I still check eBay. I still check the auctions. The Heritage and Comic Link, Comic Connect. I still check those auctions, and of course, when there were conventions, I wasn't going to conventions, and I get stuff every so often. I every day I look, see what's new on CAF, see what's new being sold on CAF. So I some of that, but I am more on the low end now. I'm building up a war chest again, so there may be change, but for the most part, I still like it. I like the art. If it's it's more, not that it's expensive. So I went to Comic-Con this time. I went on a Thursday. I picked up 4 pieces of art.
Oh wow! From artists, or did you pick them up?
All from artists. I enjoyed that more. I had seen most of the dealers I had already seen in the New Jersey show.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say, because you had mentioned you had gone to the Comic Art Con just a few weeks before that.
Yeah. But yeah, that's what I look for, Artist Alley. I see what the artists are, see if there's somebody I don't know that familiar with,
So what was the experience like going to New York Comic Con?
This time it was terrific, but I think that was partly because there was only half as much artists. It wasn't as big, but of course it was normally pretty big, so half is still fairly big.
So half is still a lot.
Yeah. So the aisles were really big. And I liked that because it was really easy to walk down the aisles, Upstairs, the aisles weren't quite as big, but I didn't spend as much time upstairs. I would spend most of my time out of Soho.
Mm-hmm.
And there was still, a lot of artists that I liked. They were there, and new ones that I liked, found that I liked. So it was, for me, I really enjoyed the show. It was great getting out.
Yeah, Samuel says that Artist Alley this year was so much better. Yeah, because it usually is pretty crowded. I don't like walking around. I mean, yeah, I do it, but yeah, it's in a normal show, it is very crowded and semi uncomfortable. So, and Mikhail was there on Thursday as well. He says that Thursday was perfect. I think that's the day that Anthony sent me the most photographs from the show as well, where I think everything was the most relaxing. It didn't feel too crowded, and Thursday seemed like a very nice day to go. So you probably picked the best day to go.
Well, that's why I pick it. I know it's early. It's a weekday, so the attendance is lower a lot of times. Thursday, even before the COVID, Thursday is a great day to go. Mm-hmm. Of course, you get a first pop. A lot of
right. Well, you've got that going for you too, right? But I think they were still selling tickets for Thursday. I know that
I think so.
Two of the days, Thursday and Sunday, I think were still available as of Thursday morning. They were still pushing. So, and that's kind of what I was curious how their attendance was going to go. But I guess it still by and large, it still seemed well attended, even though it was less capacity than in previous years. But I'm just glad they got it in. I mean, everybody was speculating in the month leading up to it that they were going to cancel it, like a lot of other shows were canceled in a 30-day.
Yeah, but New York has been turning around. I mean, they're very careful. I mean, I go to an art studio to do lithography. Mm-hmm. You have to have vaccine proof. Anybody using that studio has vaccine proof. You go to movies, you have to prove you got your vaccine. So New York is better than that. So they were really trying to come to a new normal. So yeah, I was worried they'd cancel, but I didn't think they would.
Yeah, I'm glad they saw it through too. I mean, and I look forward to going back next year. I kind of just because at the time at the beginning of beginning of September, I just was still nervous. I was thinking, all the kids are going to go back to school, and that's going to make everything spike. But it seems like it was a mistake at the end of the day. But who would know, right? I mean, when I was trying to make plans to go, Anthony invited me to go, so I thought it would be worthwhile. But I didn't want to.
But you're coming a distance.
Yeah.
So,
But like we were talking earlier, New York everybody is justifiable when they look at going to San Diego. It is a very expensive trip by and large for people coming from the West Coast. The flights are expensive and the hotels are expensive, but New York is still relatively affordable in my opinion.
Oh, good.
I think. I mean, I can drive, but even a flight, I've flown there a few times, and it's a pretty cheap flight from where I'm at, and the hotels are a bit more affordable. And there's so much to do in New York as well. So, but somebody asked, did you socialize at all? Did you run into any old friends?
I ran into Dan Poddick.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I ran into him. I didn't speak to him, but I saw Andy Robbins. Well, mm-hmm. I heard him first. As soon as I hear him, oh, yeah, there's Andy. Because I don't know Andy that well. I met him once. But, yeah, I think Dan. And then I go up to the Jack Kirby Museum. They have a booth there. And so
right.
I know those guys.
Tom Kraft and
Rand Hope.
I've never talked with Rand. I mean, I've actually asked Tom to be on the show sometime in the future. He said he would. He's just trying to figure out a schedule. So maybe I should have both of them on at the same time. That might be a fun conversation.
Yeah.
I assume Tom's a lot of
I'm sort of hoping one of the new normal is that we're going to have our meetups. We used to have meetups. Dan, mostly from Dan, he would set up meetups. Mm-hmm. So hopefully we'll get back to that stuff too.
Right. No, well, they did the society meetup a few months back. I think when the comic art show first started, Dan, I don't know if Dan organize that one. I think he shot a lot of video there.
Yes, I went to this. That was my first.
No, you did go to that one.
Yeah, I went to that one. That was my first big step. Because even though things have been better, for the most part, I hadn't been going out of my neighborhood. Mm-hmm. So I was more relaxed in my neighborhood, but but that was my first out of the neighborhood trip up to the society. And it was great.
It looked like a good time. I mean, I look forward to getting out and being able to hang out with people again. And I've hung out a lot with Berkey, but that's not like hanging out with anybody. So I mean, with a crowd, I'm looking forward to the first show. That's why we were talking earlier about Heroes Con. I definitely feel like that's probably going to be my first show next year. And I thought about maybe some of the winter shows, like a C2E2 or something, but I think I'm going to hold off and then do that. Summer will be a nice time to get started again. But Harry, this has been a lot of fun. I mean, I really appreciate that we were able to do this. I mean, I've seen you in the chat for so long. We never met, and I've known your collection on CAF for a very long time. And I appreciate the fact that you've shared so much of your work, your collection with the site. And it was great seeing that book earlier as well. I think I just love that aspect of the hobby, the fun things that we do to enjoy it more. And it just shows our passion for the hobby. And, I think that we all have different ways that we appreciate it. But I think that, what you did there was just amazing. And it's preserving things for the future, even if there's only 20 books printed. I mean, there will that book, several copies of it will be handed down. And I think that's great. I think making things like that draw good attention to the hobby, and just, I mean, that's your way of showing, your love and appreciation for it. So, and look at what you got to have that experiences with Joe and everything too. I mean, that's what a wonderful thing to do, and to show him those things too, and to get the sketches in the book. I mean, I love that. So listen, I'm trying to look through a couple other notes here and stuff, but no, this has been great. And so I'm going to talk to Tom and Rand and try to get them on next. I enjoyed having Michael Finn on. These are conversations that I don't get to have, about an aspect of the hobby, an area of the hobby that doesn't get talked about a lot. But I loved our chat today, Harry, and I'm glad you were able to take the time tonight to do it.
I'm sorry it wasn't long as most of your shows, but what are you going to do?
Oh, that's all right. I mean, at the end of the day, the marathon sessions that we do when they run over 2 hours, or the 3-hour George Hagenauer show. Now that was a long show. I don't think we always laughed about that one. That was a show where, even because that was a show we did with Mike and Will and Glenn, we were all laughing afterwards because it was like, George sure can't talk. That was the one show where I think the four of us combined didn't equal the amount of time that our guest had on a panel. So let's see, would Harry be up for a New York meetup? So well, that's what Harry. I think Harry would definitely. Yeah,
I'm definitely open for New York meetups.
Awesome. And Samuel says he's following your gallery. Full disclosure. Yeah, and everybody now that everybody knows. You should follow it, and don't hide yourself. Let other people know you care about other people's collections enough to follow it. That's really why I think why I follow other people's galleries. It's not necessarily to look at it, to spy on it or anything. I follow galleries because I really enjoy their collections. And,
that's what I do. I mean, if somebody comments on one of my pieces, that makes me curious. What type of art do they have? If they like what I've got, maybe I like what they got. And if they do, yes, I'll follow them.
Right. So So I think our change over the weekend was a good thing to add that feature. So, but that's another way too. If I don't recognize a name when somebody comments on a piece of artwork, I will always check out their CAF gallery too. And it's true. I'll usually find a kindred spirit, at least in some aspect of their hobby. And if maybe it's a piece of Frank Whiteley artwork that they comment on, and I'll go over and see the 3 or 4 pieces that they have that I might not have ever been in that person's CAF gallery. For as much time as I spend on the site, I'm always discovering new collections there, and or rediscovering them after forgetting that they were there. So yeah, it's a good way to go about the hobby. I'm sorry, one question there from ML. What are the follower stats still being tweaked? You mean on the I assume you probably mean on like the watch counts on like who's watching me. All that should be accurate now. So, but if you have a problem, you think there's something wrong, Mikhail, you can always shoot me an email. I'll definitely take a look at it. So again, Harry, thank you so much. I appreciate it. We'll be in touch because we've got I will be out of town from the 20th through the 24th. But other than that, maybe we can't get it in right before then. I'd like to do it right after that. I mean, at the end of the day, your CAF university piece might be the first one we put together and get on the site, on the YouTube channel and everything. I think that would be great, because the whole telling the difference between blue line and blue pencil, and talking about the because like I've always had my own little loop that I've looked at art, used to look at art, because I'd gotten a piece in early this year, and I wasn't really sure if it was a print or not. And I was a little concerned, to be honest with you, and I was happy to find out that it wasn't, that it was a piece of original art, but I wasn't really sure until I broke this out and really looked at the piece. So I think that this will be a really an interesting topic to show everybody, and let people know some of the tools that they can buy that can help this process out a little bit more for people. So I'm looking forward to working on that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, everybody. So again, thank you for tuning in. This was the 54th update that we were CAF chat that we've done, and we'll probably have at least 54 more of these over the next year. And let's see, the rest of this week I've got not too much going on, other than Dueling Dealers tomorrow, and then a regular CAF update on Thursday. So hope to see some of you guys there. And again, Harry, thanks so much, and I will be in touch. So good night, everybody.
Good night.